we are live. Hello, friends, and welcome back to Archaeologists in Quarantine. Believe it or not, we did have some technical issues just because we didn't know if it was going to work or not. So that's why we're so happy to be back over on YouTube and Instagram. Today, I'm joined with Alex Fitzpatrick, who is a PhD student at the University of Bradford, and she is doing zooarchaeology. I must admit, there was a time when I was like, zooarchaeology. I'm interested. Do I want to do that? Do I want to dabble in that region? But thank you so much, Alex, for joining us today and for going through that technical hiccup there.
It was like, what, like 3 minutes maybe? Tops, it was fine.
But it's one of those things, it just feels a lot longer, isn't it? Time slows down when things go wrong. So, so brilliant. I think just first things first, if that's all right, a little quick introduction to yourself and how you got into archaeology.
So yeah, I'm Alex Fitzpatrick. I'm just finishing my PhD at the University of Bradford. I defended in December, or did my Viva. I'm American, so, you know, have to play to both audiences. And so I'm doing my corrections now. So those should be done in August, hopefully. And so I'm originally from New York. I did my bachelor's in classical archaeology and anthropology at Hunter College in Manhattan. And then I moved over to the United Kingdom to do my master's at Bradford. And then I stayed on for my PhD. And now I'm stuck here forever. So hopefully. I'm hoping that I'm stuck here forever. I'd like to stay here forever.
Oh, you'd like to? You haven't been stuck here from COVID? Okay.
Oh, no. Although that is the case for some of my American friends who have been here. But yeah, it's been very interesting to be here during the pandemic and finishing a PhD. But yeah, I mean, I got into archaeology like a lot of people, embarrassingly enough. Like my dad showed me Indiana Jones when I was like way too young. I was really into it, to the point that when I was like 6 years old, I went outside and my parents were really upset about that. So then I went to my best friend's house and dug a 2-foot hole in her backyard. And then her parents weren't very happy about that. But like, it kind of just stuck. Like I got like, you know, on Facebook, you get like those memories that show up. I saw one from like 11 years ago that was me in high school talking about like going into archaeology after college. So like I've always wanted to basically go to archaeology, and I'm very stubborn, so I haven't really changed my mind.
I love the fact when I meet fellow individuals who are inspired from a really young age and have the stories of digging in their back gardens or other people's gardens. I'm sure my family members would probably say the same, that they kind of were worried at one point to leave me alone. Because what they would come back to, who knew? But if I found a pen or you know, a 2p coin, I'll be so excited and sharing everybody, and they'll just be like, yes, but look at the mess you've left. Luckily, things have changed now. We have clean sections, spores managed, you know, everything's done in the correct way. Even when digging in the garden.
I don't even dig anymore, so like I really just kind of nailed it.
Well, that's the thing. Like a lot of people I've noticed whilst doing live streaming, they're quite surprised at just the different career paths in archaeology. So you do zooarchaeology. Now, not a lot of people would know what that is. So could you just maybe summarize, if you can, without getting too excited, what is zooarchaeology?
God forbid I jump out of my seat and knock over my recording equipment. No, I do like it. Don't get me wrong, I'm just very sarcastic. It's basically dead animals. It's looking at animal remains in the archaeological record. I kind of got into it hilariously. So at Hunter College, where I did my bachelor's, their archaeology. Okay, a little bit of context. So in America, archaeology is usually done under anthropology. So, but my college was weird in that it had a classical archaeology degree in the classics department. And then you could also do an anthropology degree with archaeology as like your main focus. So I did both because I'm weird. And in the anthropology department, they were well known for their zooarchaeology. And that's basically what like every project was there. And I remember being like, oh, I don't really want to stay here to do my master's because I don't want to get pigeonholed into zooarchaeology. What if I don't like it? So I moved all the way to England only to do zooarchaeology anyway.
Great. Well, good for us anyway. I'm sure your university is happy to have you. So zooarchaeology in a nutshell is the study of animal remains.
Mm-hmm.
What type of studies within that discipline can you do, and what can what can animal bones tell us about the past?
Well, the thing I really like about zooarchaeology is, again, because archaeology itself, like you said, is so broad, because ultimately we're studying, humans, human life. So you can approach that in so many different ways. And then when you go to zooarchaeology, you're kind of narrowing it down a bit, but even still, you're very broad and you can approach it again in very different ways. I have friends who are zooarchaeologists that specifically do, ancient DNA analysis, or specifically do isotope analysis of animal remains. I've kind of bounced between a lot of different things. I'm mostly like, I guess what you would call like a nuts and bolts zooarchaeologist overall. I'm very much someone who just gets a bag of bones and like goes through and identifies them. But I'm always very keen to learn more. So I have done isotope analysis to look at, diet and where different animals may have come from, things like that. And the nice thing about zooarchaeology is it kind of combines two of the things I really liked, especially doing my anthropology degree, which is, the kind of the cultural component, because animals are so embedded in human culture, regardless of where you're from and what your cultural upbringing is. Animals are all around us. They factor into our lives in so many different ways. So it's really easy to kind of look at animal bones and kind of examine how they've been treated, what humans were doing with them, and extrapolate that onto kind of what we learn about humans of the past. So it's that cultural kind of perspective, as well as the biology stuff that I really liked when I was in high school and college. So it's like the best of two worlds for me, which is what I really like. And also I find animal bones really easy in comparison to human bones. I've done human remain analysis before, and I've had meltdowns every single time because they're too hard.
So that I find that really interesting because there's so many species.
Yeah.
And I've been on sites when the zooarch or zooarchaeologist has been like, yep, this is this type of bird, then this is I think it's literally spot dating on like just anything, the most random things. It's a pigeon, it's a crow, it's a right, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You guys get my gist. They just come up, they look at it, this is the left side of the animal, this is the right side of the animal. You can see here that it's got dog chew marks on it, or it's got butcher marks on it. It's just so fascinating, the things that we find and what they can tell us.
Yeah.
What was your first animal bone that you had to study, or you found on an excavation?
Probably during my first excavation. So what got me into doing British archaeology is during my bachelor's, I did a study abroad, as many Americans do, like in their last year of their degree. And I went to Scotland to work on the Orkney Islands with the University of Bradford. And I don't know how I got put in this position, but they tend to like just give me my own ditch and leave me alone. Maybe it's because I really liked photo cleaning. So I was the freak who was doing all the photo cleaning for everyone. But I did find and help kind of like photo clean a complete cow skeleton that had been placed under the one of the foundations of one of the buildings we were working on, as is kind of common in a lot of Iron Age buildings up in the Orkneys. So I think just seeing an in situ kind of cow skeleton that was like more or less complete, so like in the ground as it were, was really cool. And I thought that was really interesting, to the point that I was just like, I think I might actually want to do something like that. And then that was kind of just strengthened when I did my master's and did like a whole human remains course. And I was like, this is too anxiety inducing to me. And I think it's just because we know so much of human remains that I think the expectations are higher. So I like it to have a little bit more leeway because zooarchaeologists are expected to know so many species. It feels like, oh, well, you know, lower demands are made for me for the most part. And I can always whip out my little book of like skeletons to help me, which I need help a lot.
Well, it just reminds me of a couple of situations. During the Great Bush Dig, we had an amazing zooarchaeologist, Hannah.
I know
she
Hannah.
Found, so she goes by, I think, Dr. Fishborn. I'm going by memory here.
She's amazing.
She is. And I remember during filming, we found this, what looked to be maybe a chicken bone, but it was too big for a chicken bone.
Yeah.
So we're like, oh, maybe it's a peacock. And she did some further investigation, and wow, it's like the largest chicken ever found in an archaeological excavation in the UK. And that's what we found. And it was my trench. So I was like, yes, my trench. Woohoo, my new favorite find, sort of thing. A chicken bone.
I feel like that's the case with a lot of zooarch stuff, though, because I mean, we'll talk about my PhD research, but we had loads of finds like that, and I feel like it's a lot of times it's with animal bones because not a lot of archaeologists are trained in animal bone like identifications, so it's usually like a last minute discovery anyway, and also because a lot of animal bones look alike, so you do have to do like the little nitty gritty, and because there's so many different species and how so many different species mean different things to people, you know, one you might be like, okay, that's definitely a bird, but depending on what bird it is, it could completely change the interpretation, which I find exciting and makes me feel good about myself. So
that's really interesting, actually. I didn't think about that, how certain animals were used in a sort of ritualistic, I'm doing quote unquote here, ritualistic purposes that we interpret as archaeologists. And it's interesting, there are certain species that are have this connotation with that practice, but I never actually put full attention on it. It's amazing the amount of things we do subconsciously and how we interpret things subconsciously without having to explain it. And then you're like, actually, now I understand why people sometimes wonder how we jump from one theory to another so fast. But just to quickly reset the live stream, if this is your first time coming on to Behind the Trowel, don't forget to hit that like, share, subscribe button. Today we are interviewing Alex Fitzpatrick, aka Archaeology Fitz. You will find all her socials in the links below. Please check them out. or here, who knows? We're on an aeroplane now. So this is our virtual aeroplane. And as you're doing this with your hands, Alex, I've noticed behind there is this beautiful image, which happens to be the thumbnail for today's video as well. Could you give us a little explanation of what these bones are?
These are actually from my PhD research on the Covesea Caves. Even though it says Covesea Caves, it is Covesea. I spent 2 months of my PhD pronouncing it wrong until finally my supervisor had to pull me aside and be like, Alex, it's Covesea. You need to at least pronounce the name right. I'm like, that's fair. But yeah, so this is actually a really important group of animal bones. So the Covesea Caves are a series of caves on the Moray Firth coast in the northeast of Scotland. And there's a lot going on there. I mean, I'll get into it a little bit more detail, but basically there's funerary things happening, there's ritual things happening. We have human bones and animal bones placed there together. No one really knows what's happening. So that was my whole PhD research. And one of the things we found was kind of this a ditch that basically was it was a deposit that was clearly put there. And these are all the animal bones that were in there that I took a nice photo of, and it's probably the only photo I'm very proud of. So I use it for everything. But it's really interesting because, again, like we were just talking about, it kind of shows the like wide range of species, because there's mammals, there's fish, there's bird bone in here, and these were all put together, and it was capped with a Bronze Age juvenile human pelvis fragment. So it's really interesting. And then it turns out that a lot of this stuff ended up being late medieval anyway. So that kind of goes into what I was talking about in all these really weird surprises, in that when I first started the PhD, I was told like, this is later prehistoric. So we know that it's like Neolithic to like late Iron Age. That's when the activity is happening. So, you know, I go in, I do all my research based on that. And I'm not even joking. The December before the pandemic, so December 2000, finally get some dating results back. Turns out half of the stuff I have is medieval.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, I'm supposed to finish this in a year. This is interesting. So it turned out to be like a much longer range of like use. And it completely changed a lot of the interpretation that we had, which was amazing and also extremely stressful for me, because I really thought that this is all later prehistoric, to the point that I think my PhD title is still later prehistoric, ritual and funerary stuff. Not stuff, but you know what I mean. I didn't write stuff in my PhD, I promise.
Don't worry, it's the lingo that we use whilst we're describing something, not in a journal or report. This is when we're conversing with each other. Yeah. And by the way, again, if this is your first time coming on to Archaeologists in Quarantine, this is a interactive live stream. So if you have any questions for Alex or myself, please head over to YouTube, go into the live chat box and write your question there. And we'll hopefully get to answer all of them. Who knows? But quickly do a couple of shout outs. Hello, Nigel. Hello, Barbara. Delby, Emily, Amelia. Hey, Amelia. Rocking Boat. I can never say your name, Rocking Bokin. But I remember from you were on our Ancient Ink live stream. I remember. And hey, Erin. Okay. Erin. So Erin Ray, we actually got to interview last week, where we did isotopic analysis, which is actually roughly what Alex was just mentioning here. And it's quite an important scientific tool, if you like, an archaeology toolkit of understanding what's going on. And Erin just said, hooray, cave archaeology. How well stratified were the deposits?
They were pretty well stratified. The problem with our caves were, so one of the caves that we were working in, Covesea Cave 2, not a very descriptive name, I know, but that was just the name of the cave. It used to be a site for amateur archaeologists. So a lot of the stuff we ended up digging were a lot of, spoil heaps and things like that, which kind of threw off a lot of the stratigraphy. And actually, now I think about it, it's not as, the stratigraphy wasn't as nice as I remembered, because we also had a lot of intermixing due to reuse of the cave, burrowing animals, things like that. And like I was saying before, the medieval like material was covered with a late Bronze Age human remain. It's kind of the whole story of the cave itself is a lot of reuse and remodification of the cave. So yeah, actually, no, the stratigraphy was pretty terrible and awful and mixed up. I do remember being like, when we first started, like, oh, this is gonna be so nice, like a nice cave, like it's in its own context. It's very, closed off. There shouldn't be much. And then as it got over, there's a lot of like rodents and stuff. Oh, very sad.
Well, it would be really cool if we could see some examples of what you found, and maybe the location of the cave itself, if possible. That'd be amazing for us.
Let me do the exciting thing called share screen.
Whoop, whoop.
Wow, look, it's PowerPoint. If anyone, I did a talk for Current Archaeology, so if anyone saw that, these slides may look very familiar. But yeah, these are the 4 caves that made up the bulk of my PhD research. So the Sculptor's Cave is probably the most famous one. It is the one that got kind of sensationalized in the news when they were doing work on it originally, because of how many juvenile human remains were found there. Specifically, mandibles were found, and there were signs of decapitation. So apparently one of the local newspapers went with the title, with like a headline that was basically like decapitated children found in cave, which is not helpful to anyone really, but it's very much like one of those very sensationalized local finds. And then you have Covesea Cave 1 and Covesea Cave 2. Covesea Cave 2 was basically the bulk of my work. I was the first zooarchaeologist to do a lot of the analysis on this bone, which is, again, totally not stressful at all. It was fine. And I also did Laird Stables, which is allegedly a old horse stable. It was a cave that was used to hold horses. And we only found one horse bone in that entire place. So don't know how true that is. At least one horse was there. But yeah, ooh, comparative analysis. This is just some of the other stuff I was doing. But
I can give us a quick rundown. It's okay, don't worry. We're all very interested in this site now.
So yeah, basically, sorry. I really want to just kind of talk about the finds, to be honest. Methodology. We don't need methodology.
No, we don't.
No.
We do, but we don't. Not for this one anyway.
No, we never need methodology. What are you talking about? No. So these are some of the finds, the nicer finds. I mean, I've probably got like thousands of photos of what we like to call garbage bone, because it's just extremely fragmented bone that isn't very helpful at all to anyone, specifically not me. But Covesea Cave 2 was kind of great. It had, in the Neolithic section, or the Neolithic context, they had these amazingly well-preserved red deer bone that are so big. So the top right photo, so there are two mandibles. The lighter color one on the top is the modern day from our reference collection at Bradford. The one on the bottom is the red deer mandible we found in the cave, which was so big, as you can see, that I had to go and double check to make sure that it wasn't giant elk, it wasn't reindeer or anything. It was just so massive, it really blew our minds. And then on the left is a cranial vault of a red deer, likely a female red deer, which, if you know anything about Zooarchaeology, it's a Mesolithic site in the UK. They have these amazing headdresses that are made out of the cranial vaults of red deer. So of course you see this and you're like, oh, maybe that's a headdress. And it's pretty inconclusive because we didn't really find, or I didn't really find any, cut marks that match that. But it's just so well preserved that it might be. I mean, I feel like that's something about archaeology some people don't realize, is that a lot of the stuff you end up kind of coming up with in terms of interpretations is basically you just kind of shrugging your shoulders and going, it could be. Because, you're not going to, for the most part, you're really not going to find like hugely conclusive evidence. It's always going to be kind of like a bit of a question mark. Or at least that's what I tell myself to make myself feel better. So you were talking about chicken bones. On the lower left is a cockspur from a male chicken. And that gave us so much grief because if people aren't familiar with, there's a big chicken project going on, or has been going on, that Naomi Sykes has been running. And people are still looking in to see what is the earliest chicken in Britain. So we found these chicken bones in what we thought were Neolithic contexts. And we were, of course we were so hyped because, oh my gosh, did we find the earliest chicken? That would be amazing. That would be huge. Like I was already thinking about like the Nature paper we'd write on it. And then we did further dating and it turns out it's medieval. It just got mixed in. So that really kind of bummed us all out, but it's still good to see. And then the one next to that is a crane tibiotarsus bone. So birds are weird. I mean, birds are weird, but also skeletally they're weird because they only have like 27 bones. Most of their bones are kind of fused together. So the tibiotarsus is basically the tibia bone and the tarsus bone fused together into one. So you can't really tell by the picture unless you squint and look at the size, but that's like a foot long, that bone. And when it was first given to me, I was told, oh, is this like a really thin human bone? It's so big, it has to be like human. And I remember seeing the bottom, and tibiotarsus are very distinct, and the bottom of the bone is very like curly. And I was like, no, that's a gigantic bird. Like that's a huge bird, and what it is. And I had to go to a couple of museums and found out that it was a crane. which was in the medieval context. So that's also extremely interesting. So we basically have some kind of weird pagan-y, witchcrafty stuff going on in the medieval period in this cave. And like, I mean, I get it. If you walked into a cave and found a bunch of human bones, you'd probably be like, oh, this is some witchy stuff. Like, those are good vibes, as you do.
One question though, we just had a question come in from Instagram.
Yeah.
What is the oldest chicken bone, archaeologically speaking, so far?
I can't tell you like where off the top of my head. I think it's an Iron Age bone, and I want to say it was maybe at Fishburn, but I'm not sure. I don't know. I feel like there was like recent developments, being like the last year or so in that, but I don't know, maybe I'm just still bitter about not having the earliest chicken bones. So I just kind of shut my brain off to any news about it.
No, that's fascinating. I didn't know there's only 27 bones in
it's something birds. Like 25 to 27, because obviously some birds will have a bit more bone than others. But yeah, it's really weird. It makes identifications a little easier, obviously, as well, because birds have so specific types of bones that if you see them, you can kind of be like, well, at least we know it's avian. And then you cry over having to figure out what species it is, because it can be very hard sometimes. There's just too many birds and too many fish, and I'm not into that. But yeah, so these are Covesea Cave 1 finds. And one of the things that we found across the board in the caves is there were so many canid and felid remains, like way more than we thought were going to be there. And the reason why I say canid and felid and not cat and dog is because sadly we got them tested for ancient DNA to hopefully figure out if it was, so let me wind back a bit. Because of domestication, domestication didn't just change the behaviors of, wolves and wildcats. It basically changed them into what is technically a different species. So it's actually really important to differentiate between, do you have a wolf or do you have a domesticated dog in your remains? And again, that's a small little tweak that will completely change your interpretation. So we had all these what looked like cat bones and dog bones, and we sent them off. And sadly, they came up with no results, which I'm still a bit suspicious about, but okay. It's very sad. So technically they're canid and felid remains. Part of me thinks that the cats are wild cats and the dogs are dogs, like domesticated dogs. But again, it's not something I can say conclusively. But their presence is everywhere. They show up in multiple periods, from like the Iron Age to the medieval. And on the right, these bones are covered in cat chew marks and dog chew marks. So you know that they were here and they were chewing on the bone and they were actively in these caves, which is really exciting and shows, the kind of inhabitants going in and out of the caves. But sadly, can't tell you if they were actually cats or wildcats, which again seems like such a small thing, but is a huge difference in terms of like, were they actually with the humans coming in and out of the caves, or were they just there when the humans weren't there? Stuff like that.
I find it really interesting when we talk about bones being gnawed on by dogs or cats, and even the concept of domestication. We did do a live stream with David and Hal on the domestication of dogs. Yeah, but every time, like again now, I just remember being on site and having zooarchaeologists being like, well, this has been chewed. And you're just like, wow, how do you know that? Show me. Like, I need to understand this too, because it's just so fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I always find gnaw marks to be the easiest too. Like when it comes to like butchery, I'm extremely bad at butchery. There are a lot of zooarchaeologists out there who will be like, oh, this was done by a blunt, axe or something. And I'm just like, I don't know, don't see it. I have no idea what you're talking about. But like gnaw marks have always been really interesting to me. And I mean, I can only really identify broadly from like dog, cat, rodent, human. But obviously there's so many other animals, like sheep will occasionally gnaw on bone, pigs gnaw on bone. and they all come out with different kind of teeth marks. Like rodent, I always find really easy because they have those two incisors, the big incisors. So they kind of scratch at the bone and you get these like really nice long striation marks. Dogs are also really interesting because they slobber so much. So you get one hole. So like the top one is like a good example of it. You get one hole where they've kind of put their canine into the bone. And then because they slobber so much, they actually polish the bone a bit. So it always looks shinier and nicer looking than other bone. And then cats kind of just like poke little holes in it and make it look awful. I love cats, but yeah. And then I got some large stables ones. So on the top left, you have, I believe that's another canid bone, part of the vertebra. And then below it is the one horse bone we found in this alleged stables, which was a horse rib. And these stables are really weird because the kind of animals I was finding in them made it seem like it was a very like natural kind of context, in that there weren't that many humans going into them or doing any of the weird stuff that they were doing in the other caves. And it was mostly like fish and birds. So for a while I was like, oh, maybe this is just like wild animals going in and out of this cave. And then when we went and dug at it, we found pavement slabs, and there was a Roman Iron Age buckle that we found in a deposit, as well as these boar tusks, which are on the picture on the right, were all put in the deposit. So there was clearly actually something going on there, more than we actually assumed. So again, this project has just been like our assumptions getting challenged at every single turn. And it's funny because like, you know, as archaeologists, you think, oh, well, you know, I try to ignore my biases, but like you still have them there. You know, I found this out when I was doing comparative analysis with the human remains. Part of my PhD research was looking at the human remains from these caves as well to kind of see the difference in treatment. And I remember being like, oh, there's a lot of like, you know, marrow cracked bones. So they were cracked for the marrow inside. I was like, it's not really a big deal. And someone finally had to be like, Alex, that's a huge deal, because, you know, if they are marrow cracked bones, that could be a sign of cannibalism. And it just completely went over my head because obviously I work with animal bones so much. Marrow cracking always seemed like a very obvious thing. And unfortunately, I couldn't really confirm the cannibalism angle because of the pandemic. I couldn't go back and look at and see if they were indeed marrow cracked bones or, you know, just kind of fragmented in that way. But it was just one of those examples of something that I assumed was like, again, not a big deal, but would be a huge deal if it turned out to be true.
That's the thing about archaeology and doing analysis. As you said, even with your research, how it constantly changes and evolves the more information we get. So it's just fascinating, really is. I hope everyone now looks at the animal bones in a different light after today's talk, and maybe just look at just the way it's made, like the skeleton of each animal as well, and how it's super cool.
And I think that's mostly trying to look. This is basically what I was saying before. The only real thing I want to point out here, I think, is so this one bone that on the top left, that bone is great. It is a great auk humerus. Now, the great auk is an extinct bird, and again, it's one of those things that we didn't really think would be in the context at all. Turns out there are loads of great auk in our assemblages, which was amazing for me because I've never actually worked with an extinct animal before. And these were like super well preserved to the point that there were still soft of the remains. And it's so wild to work with an animal that you've never seen and you never will see because obviously it's extinct. So that was like, it kind of like changed, like blew my mind for sure. And it's kind of informed a lot of the projects that I'm kind of looking into, because obviously I'm at the point where I'm thinking about postdocs, thinking about other projects I want to start working on. And the extinction angle has really not left my mind, in that I'm really getting more interested to, how do we approach extinct animals as zooarchaeologists? Because obviously there is a fine line between zooarchaeology and paleontology. And there are some modern day extinct animals that zooarchaeologists can look at. So there's a lot of stuff that are in my brain right now that, where I should probably be more focused on finishing my PhD. But, I love overthinking about these kind of stuff. And the other thing I want to point out is in between that cranial vault picture that I showed before and the tibia-tarsus crane picture is a pig mandible that, if you look really closely, you'll see has cut marks on, like, right here. So the interesting thing about that is that it's the same kind of cut marks we found on some of the human bone, indicating probably that both of these bones were getting defleshed manually. So one of the things about the human bones in these caves is that they were going through excarnation, where they were probably being defleshed manually, but also being left out in the open to get naturally kind of defleshed. And that was their process of dealing with the human remains from whatever community this was, which is really interesting. And it was interesting to compare that with the animal remains, and obviously was kind of the bulk of my PhD, but it was also like a huge test of endurance for me. Because again, like I was saying before, I'm not a human bones person. I can do it, but it was very stressful. Oddly enough, more stressful than dealing with, I think it turned out to be like almost 8,000 animal bones that I dealt with for my PhD, and then like maybe 30 human remains. And that was it. But I found that way more stressful, to be completely honest. I think that's it for pictures. So
I just think that's, I'm just like, I can't, 8,000 animal bones.
More or less, yeah.
Oh my goodness, I'm never going to clean again if I have to look at a bag and organize that.
And that's on the low side, because I know people who are doing their PhDs in zooarchaeology who are dealing with like 20,000 bones or something, and now I feel bad for complaining.
Oh my goodness. Why doing that analysis? Because obviously, especially with zooarchaeology, you have to, it's very hands-on. I mean, yes, you're studying, you're researching, but you really, to be able to spot something, to spot data, or be able to, not spot date, spot find, what would you spot species? I don't know. I'm so used to saying spot dating because it's like for pottery or glass, but well, I don't know. I say spot date, but
yeah, something like that.
Something like that, yeah. So to be able to do that, that takes a lot of skill, a lot of time to analyze different animal skeletons, and then in different archaeological context. So doing that 8,000, do you feel like now you're more, I don't know, confident in red deer bones, or as you said, auk? Okay, are there certain species now that you're like, if I saw it, I know exactly what it is straight away?
Yeah, definitely. But again, like you're saying, it is also region specific, because I get, especially because I have a website that's just called Animal Archaeology. So I get a lot of questions from people about just broadly. And I get a lot of people who just send me pictures of bones asking, what is this? And the thing I always have to tell people is that, well, it depends on where you're from, because, I have friends who have sent me pictures from the States. I mean, I've had my mom send me a picture from like, oh, I found this on the farm. What is this? And I'm like, I don't do North American remains, so I might not actually know, to be completely honest. Like, there's things that I think some zooarchaeologists, like in North America, would be like, oh, that's something basic, we get it all the time. I would not know, and then vice versa. Just because I think some people who aren't in zooarchaeology forget that, regions have their own specific types of species. And even though there are some crossover, in the North America and in the UK, we'll probably both come across things like, sheep or dogs, stuff like that. But there's still like, it's not like I'm going to find a raccoon skull like in the UK. And if I do, that would be very interesting. And I have, but yeah, so sometimes, it is, even though it seems like a lot, it's still very region specific. So it's probably only like a couple dozen species that I probably know off the top of my head at this point.
How many animal species are there? Do you know?
Like in the world?
Yeah, in the world. How many?
A lot.
Okay, in the
you
UK, I've never asked this question before. I've never thought of it, to be completely honest.
I literally looked it up because did a I did a show last week called Zoology. I don't know how they pronounced it, but it was like a comedy show, and I actually looked up how much, and I already forgot it, but it's a lot. It's like in the hundreds. Like I think it was like 200 something for a bird species. There's definitely a lot more bird species and fish species than mammal species. And we're talking specifically like native to the UK. But it's still a lot. I mean, like I was like doing the math and stuff of like, you know, if you have this many species and that many distinct bones, like that's how many you would know. But like the truth is also all of us zooarchaeologists have either reference collections or manuals to help us identify. I mean, like I've got like a whole library of manuals in my office. I have a small personal reference collection in my office as well. If anyone wants to send me more animal bones, I'll happily take them. But you know,
I was gonna say, just for our viewers, reference collection does mean the literal like
bones
themselves. So
yeah, like as a cast skull. I just pulled that off because I have the reference collection next to me. But like, yeah, like it's basically for zooarchaeology, you get the their modern day collections of animal bones, and you just kind of compare the two. That's what a lot of my analysis ends up being, is I hold up the bone from the archaeological site and I hold up what I think is the modern equivalent and just kind of see if it matches. And the other thing is that probably 90% of the bones I get are fragmented. So it's even more difficult. So not only are you trying to identify species, and a lot of times you're trying to identify element. So like what bone it is. Like obviously some of them are a little bit easier. I can probably tell if I have a fragment of a skull, but stuff like long bones and things like that, if you get like a little tiny piece of it, it's a lot of just kind of like going between the two. And then once you finally get the element down, you have to start pulling out different species, the whole thing.
we did have Rockin, thanks Rockin. He just said apparently, according to Google, 1 to 2 million animal species.
Too many. No.
And Nigel made a comment, 8,000 bones. They sound more interesting than 8,000 potsherds, as they came from real living, breathing creatures.
It's true. It's because potsherds are boring.
Watch now. That's it. You've started another war.
No, I'm just joking, even though I'm on record as saying that potsherds are boring and I find ceramics really boring.
Hey, everyone has their go-to.
Yeah, they do.
And you know, you've mentioned something quite interesting, which I didn't think about as well, is extinct animals and how we see that in the archaeological record and how we can even identify them. I didn't really appreciate the reference collections in museums that much before, because I always felt like there's so many of them, but actually we need them so we can identify it. It's like, you know, you need both really to coexist, to be able to work out what's going on in the past. But if some great questions come in, Alex asked, which animals for you are the most exciting to explore?
Any of the ones that have to do with domestication, really, I find that really interesting, especially when I'm trying to figure out if they are the like pre-domesticated species. So like, again, if am I looking at a wolf or am I looking at a dog? Because again, that really changes the interpretation. If I'm looking at a wolf, you know, am I thinking, oh, this is just, you know, a natural inhabitant of the caves, or like something that just wandered in, as animals do. If I'm looking at a dog, oh, did they accompany the humans? Were they there during human rituals and funerary rites? And then there's also that in-between part, which is, were they a wolf on the process of being domesticated? So like, were they just on the outside? Because we also had evidence of, you know, like low-level feast there to pick up the scraps at the end. You know, it's, again, there's just like a huge spectrum of kind of like interpretations that change depending on where in the domestication process it is. So I'm always really excited about that. And yeah, anything that's not fish or bird, really, I'm excited about.
And if I remember correctly, fish bones, they're hollow inside, right? That's how you can straight away know it's the fish bone. And of course, they're really small.
Yeah, fish have this like sheen to them. They're like really shiny. and horrible. So that's how I usually tell difference. And bird bone is also hollow, which is how they fly. So if you like pick it up and it's very light, it's probably a bird bone. And again, they're also horrible. So if I have an immediate disgust of them, it's probably a bird bone.
Questions again. Hello to our friends in Nigeria, Sri Lanka, and Barbados. Hey, thank you for joining us. And it seems everybody's agreeing with you that they do prefer animal bones to pottery in this instance.
Woo! Join the wave.
Well, I guess in the title in itself, we would have got more animal bone lovers. I had a great question here from Dalby. So this is their comment. Brilliant. As an ex-chef, I sometimes use archaeology and bone findings to explain the origins of foods. After the chicken bones, any idea where the oldest known lamb bones have been found to date? That's a quite...
I mean, I won't be able to answer that question because I don't know. But I also love the idea of, because when I first started doing zooarchaeology and like was really focusing on it, I actually was like, oh, I wonder if I should like take a course in butchery, like modern day butchery, to get my head around cutting techniques, because that's so integral to like looking at, refuse from meals and stuff like that. And I'm also very interested in people, because I know I have so many colleagues and friends that I know of who went from a different field to archaeology and then used their expertise from that field to help with archaeology. So Julia Beaumont, who used to be at the University of Bradford, she used to be a dentist and then became an archaeologist whose expertise is human teeth, obviously. In college, I knew someone who was a hairdresser who went into archaeology, and their whole PhD was on looking at Roman depictions of hair and kind of figuring out how that was done, what they were using, and things like that. Like I know people who used to do clothing and costuming who went into archaeology. And again, we're looking at textiles and stuff like that. And I find that so interesting because, again, archaeology has this huge spectrum of things you can use to approach the field with. So it's always fascinating to me. And also it makes me sad because there's not enough veterinarians getting into archaeology, because we all, one of the things about zooarchaeology is that pathology, so like sicknesses in animals, how that is shown in the bone, it's kind of an under-researched field, or relatively under-researched compared to everything else. So if you're a veterinarian out there, maybe consider going into archaeology, because I'm very bad at pathologies.
There you go. So there's a niche market right there.
Exactly.
If you'd like to study animal bones and disease, there you go. That could be your market. That's quite interesting, actually. Do you have any advice for individual students, maybe who are looking to do a master's in zooarchaeology and even a PhD?
I mean, yeah, no, definitely do the research on where you want to do your degree if you're going to do zooarchaeology, because not every university has a specific, like Sheffield is great. Sheffield has its own zooarchaeology lab. It's probably one of the more well-known ones. Exeter is also great in terms of zooarchaeology. As much as I love Bradford, zooarchaeology isn't really a thing. At the time of me doing the PhD, I was the only zooarchaeologist who was like not staff there. That probably has changed, but still it's not as many people. So obviously, even though I still had loads of support, you don't have the same kind of material to use as like Sheffield, which has its own, zooarch lab. And then also just kind of broaden your studies and things like that. Like I really started to reread and re-research stuff into biology and zoology and things like that. That just, all it does is strengthen your abilities. And that's the nice thing about archaeology. I love interdisciplinary research, and archaeology is such a good outlet for that. So, I was able to do research and kind of use research from biologists and zoologists and people who do conservation into my own work. So yeah, just kind of not being afraid of interdisciplinary stuff. It's good. Apparently it looks good on grants. I don't know. I've never been able to get a grant. So hey, probably does.
And we had a comment here from Alex who said, apparently Russian and German scientists have discovered the remains of the oldest domestic sheep that lived on the Altai almost 5,500 years ago. That's quite cool. That is true. Who knows? This is one thing I find quite difficult with even when we're searching for information online.
Mm-hmm.
Have you noticed, like, generally speaking, no matter what we're researching, you can't just go off what's on the first page. You really have to go through it all because there's so much misinformation out there, which is why, like, I love what you're doing with ArchaeoAnimals. Is that ArchaeoAnimals? I always forget the way it is. But the point is, ArchaeoAnimals, right? So you're making a blog. You've been doing a blog for a couple of years. You've got a podcast out there. You're using social media to engage with the public and show them zooarchaeology, right? So you're showing the facts. You're trying to get rid of this misinformation. So how do you feel like the importance of that, and how has that changed maybe other people's interests into zooarchaeology whilst you've been on social media actively?
I mean, I think, like, honestly, the number one thing is that it's made people aware of it. I mean, zooarchaeology, even though there's loads of us, you know, in comparison with the rest of archaeology, we're a much smaller subfield. And I don't think people really think about that, because obviously, especially when you're looking at like people promoting archaeology, and not necessarily archaeologists, like museums and stuff like that, the things they pull out are, you know, the human remains, like, you know, mummies or something like that, the really nice artifacts, things like that. You don't necessarily see the British Museum pulling out their like fragmented sheep bones that they found in a midden or something and making a whole exhibition on that, although they should. But like, and you should hire me, but you know, animal bones are very much part of that, the mundane archaeology for the most part. You know, a lot of the, like, even though I do really interesting, cool ritual stuff, you know, that's only probably like 25% of the animal remains you find. Most of them are going to be like either natural contacts or like basically your rubbish, like people's food from you know, whenever. So it is very mundane. I think that's why it doesn't really get its kind of spotlight. So me being a loud New Yorker, I'm hoping, and it seems to be the case, that more people get first understand what it is and then kind of understand what it does. And I don't think I get as much when it comes to pseudo-archaeology as some of my colleagues. You know, my friend Stephanie Hamhofer is like one of the like pseudo-archaeology people who like researches all that. But you know, I still want to put the research, the facts out there. And like our podcast, ArchaeoAnimals, we always put like a bit of a bibliography so that people can see the research. And we obviously kind of regurgitate it in a way that's, you know, probably a bit more listenable than if I just read a paper word for word. No offense, but they're a bit dry academic papers. But yeah, as long as the information is getting out there, you know, it's kind of the important part, especially because archaeology as a whole is so ripe for misuse in terms of, you know, propaganda and things like that, you know, and scientific racism. So just kind of being very transparent is really key, I feel like, especially if you're using social media to get outrage out there. And I think that's why stuff like this is good too, because it's a very human, like, portrayal of archaeology, like a live stream. I can't really edit myself, nor will I ever do that, because
I was just gonna say, by the way, for our viewers who are still with us, what is your favorite animal? Let's just see what it is. Put it in the live chat box, please, because already as we were speaking, people were saying, oh, this is my favorite animal. So for example, Barbara's like, I love peacocks and ostriches. And then Delby was asking for his daughter, by any chance, have you found giant quails in the US? That's the daughter asking. I mean, how big are quails? They're quite small, aren't they, quails?
Yeah, I have a friend in Portland who raises quail on her farm, and they're like that big. I have no idea though. Even though I'm American, I've never done archaeology in the US, so I'm completely out there with that.
Well, that's the thing as well. Like, it's one of those things that people don't realize, that there's somewhat empowerment to be like, I don't know what that is. However, I know somebody who does.
Yeah.
Let me find out for you. And that's what we do. We always have these conversations with each other.
Yeah.
In the, you know, a lecture hall to in the trenches. We're constantly communicating with each other. I think that's what I love about archaeology the most, is that we're constantly having this interpretation, this back and forth debate.
Yeah. And like zooarchaeology is great because if you like look up the zooarchaeology hashtag on Twitter, it's just zooarchaeologists going, I found this bone. Does anyone know what it is? Like, like I remember like asking someone like, is that okay? Like, is that like cheating? And they're like, no, we all literally do. Like there's a like an email list of zooarchaeologists, and 90% of the time is just people going, I found this bone, and it's like someone who's a really well-known zooarchaeologist. Because at the end of the day, even if you're like, you know, the most renowned zooarchaeologist, there's still going to be bones where you're like, I have no idea what this is. And it's been nice. There is a bit of a nice community with zooarchaeologists in that, you know, we share resources from each other. We'll look at each other's bones and be like, oh, hey, that actually looks like blah, blah, blah. Or like, I actually have one in my reference collection. Let me pull it out and show it to you. And it's also really nice because there doesn't seem to be as much of a stratification in terms of hierarchy. Like if you go on Twitter, you'll see people who are like tenured academic zooarchaeologists who are asking PhD students like, oh, do you know what this is? So it's nice. And I think that's really healthy, that kind of like, we're not going to know everything. That kind of attitude, I think, should be maybe supported more in a lot of academia. You're not going to know everything. Even if you do think you know everything, you probably don't. So like having that kind of like humble attitude has been great, especially for me, because I don't know anything.
You do know a lot. But the thing is, like, you know, it's having those conversations and having the accessibility to do so is what I think is so great about the community.
Yeah.
Is that we can converse with each other. Whether that might be opposing views or whatever, but you can still have this dialogue. Yeah. A great suggestion here from Victor, who said you could make a side income on zoo jewelry, so like zoo archaeology jewelry. Ooh. You could make like, yeah, it's quite a cool idea, you know. You can make a little.
I definitely do have some bone jewelry, so yeah.
But let's quickly go before we are hitting the hour mark, everybody. I'm gonna see if there's anything. I think people are loving the statement about chickens, by the way. I think people were really surprised. I was surprised to hear that there is a study about the oldest chickens.
Yeah, look up the Chicken Project. I think it's still ongoing from what I heard. It's Naomi Sykes is the PI on that. It's really good work. Chickens are great, I guess, even though I don't like birds.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, I'm just like reading all the comments that are coming through. But no, I think it's really so interesting speaking with you today about zooarchaeology, because it's one of those things that doesn't get enough limelight. Mm-hmm. It really doesn't, but does it? If you think about it, people are fascinated with human remains and the concept of burials and funeral rites. But sometimes a lot of people miss out that animals are also a part of that process.
Yeah.
One of the last few questions coming in is, what was your favorite? Oh, where did it go? Whilst I look for that, I would ask if you could choose any type of animal burial to excavate in any time period, what would it be and why?
I want to go to Siberia to look at the permafrost there because they keep having the coolest stuff, and it makes me so mad because I'm not there. If you literally just go on Google News and look up like Siberia permafrost, you'll find, you know, perfectly preserved prehistoric dogs and like lions or whatever and things like that. They're so gorgeous and amazing and so preserved. It really.
There we go. Even a couple of mummies as well, you'll get there. In Siberia.
We could go all day with all my tattoos. I got loads of animal bone tattoos.
Oh, are they? That's really cool, actually. We did have a question coming in about the tattoos, but
that's a boar skull.
That's very cool.
Yeah, I got a lot. I don't know. This is what I decided to do with my money.
Hey, I love it. I love Ancient Ink. We did a whole live stream on it, and I think it went for maybe 2 hours because we were all just like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing!"
It's so great, yeah.
Yeah, but the thing about Siberia is I've worked in Siberia for a couple of years, and then I got this whilst I was in Ukraine because obviously the permafrost, the amazing permafrost. It's horrible to dig in though.
Yeah, I can imagine, but like
it's horrible.
I just why don't we have permafrost here? Just kidding. Let's not have permafrost here.
No. I do not recommend digging with a pickaxe or mattock. depending where you are in the world, to have to go through that ice. It's awful. And then when it defrosts, you're literally working against the clock to get everything done. It's a new type of stress that as archaeologists, I don't think we generally like. So, but that's been amazing. Before we go, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us? Your social medias, anything that we should be checking out in the foreseeable future?
I have all my information on my website, animalarchaeology.com, and I'm very proud that I got that domain before anyone else could. So to all those zooarchaeologists who wanted that domain, I did it. But yeah, I'm on Twitter at ArchaeologyFits. I'm also on Instagram under that. I like to share pictures of my reference collection, stuff like that. And I've got a podcast on the Archaeology Podcast Network called ArchaeoAnimals, where we talk about zooarchaeology with my co-host Simona Falanga, who's also an archaeologist, who specifically does zooarchaeology. But we've mostly been talking about video games lately because why not? It's my podcast.
But I hope next time we can get you on when we do a panel discussion about decolonizing archaeology, which I know you're passionate about, and so am I, and also about mental health in an archaeological setting as well. These are both great subjects that I feel should have a separate stream for.
Yeah, of course.
And I just think it would be really, hopefully we can get you on Clubhouse onto Archaeology and History 101. Link is in the description below, along with all of Alex's links as well. But we just want to keep this dialogue going, and there are so many important things that you are a part of. And if you were to Google Alex right now, you'll see a number of things that she is constantly online speaking about, all to do with archaeology.
You could just put constantly online, and that's kind of more or less it. Just constantly online and should log off maybe.
No, this is the thing. It's a way to disseminate information, not only the fastest way possible, but the most accessible way. Yeah, in my opinion.
No, for sure, definitely.
I thank you for it, because nobody wants to be reading through an article.
No, I don't want to be reading through
a textbook. I just want to read through the abstract and that's it, but that's why I prefer videos and visuals and things like that. But again, thank you so much, Alex, for joining us on short notice. And thank you to the viewers who have stuck by throughout the whole stream. We see you, we appreciate you, and we will see you not next week, the week after, because next week we are off. I've been told I've got to have the weekend off. So next week we are offline. That might change. Who knows? That might change.
Take some time off. My goodness, you do so much. Chill.
No, I really would like to do the stream, but it's a birthday weekend. Not like we can actually do anything, but it's the concept, isn't it?
It's a state of mind, really.
It is, I think. But I love live streaming. It's a part of what's my life's been for the past year now.
Yeah.
It's when I get to wear my t-shirt, so it's weird when I don't get to wear it for my Saturday. But anyway, thank you so much, Alex, for joining us, and we'll see you all next time.